Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for March 7th, 2016. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today we're joined by Ed Skoudis. You're the co-founder of Counterhack? Counterhack, pardon me. I can't seem to get anything right today.
It's all good, it's all good.
And Ed, you joined us back in October.
That's right.
And at the time you were introducing the holiday Hacker Challenge.
That's right.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Right.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here. You know, last October I couldn't talk about the details because we're still finalizing.
Right.
Now I'm ready to reveal all the stuff.
All right. All the nitty-gritty details. And Stan, you had the opportunity to participate in that.
Yes.
So
it was a lot of fun, and thank you for having me on the show today, so I can actually talk to it. That's cool.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be it's going to be great listening to you kind of go back and forth about some of the activities and observations. So looking forward to that. And online here we have Jim Clausing, and Jim, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Okay, and I'm Brian Rexroad, and a little fumbling around today, but we'll get through this. And so, Ed, you were at RSA.
That's right.
Just this last week.
Yep.
And I think among the four of us, you are the sole attendee at the RSA conference. So tell us a little bit about what you saw and what you found interesting.
You know, RSA is huge. That's the biggest thing about RSA. They said there were over 45,000 people there this year. It's like a city. And I've been going almost every year since 1996. I've missed a couple of years. I think I wasn't there in 2002, 2003. And I've watched it as it's grown and evolved. It is an amazing event. The thing I find most interesting about it is it pulls together people from so many different disciplines. You know, back in the day when I first started going, it was very technical people, especially people with crypto backgrounds.
Well, and that was basically what we had to choose from in the security space back then, right?
Yeah, you were the crypto person, or maybe you were the firewall person,
right.
or, you know, that's pretty much what we had. I was the firewall person who ended up getting to go to the crypto conference. But now, in addition to all the technical people there's a lot of lawyers, public policy people, government folks. It's fantastic because all these minds coming together. The theme of this year's conference was connect to protect. So, you know, connect with people, your peers, and figure out how we can come up with ways to protect things better. It was neat. It's totally exhausting, you know, to spend a week out there with those folks. I had the honor of presenting a couple times, and the neat thing is you can present in front of 1,000 people or more. So RSA is quite an adventure. I'm looking forward to going back next year.
Good, good. So were there any things that you saw there that were particularly notable?
Yeah, there were some really interesting big kind of picture themes. One of them is they had Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter present there, and he presented on a new bug bounty program that the DoD is engaged in. So this is the United States Department of Defense. If they have a web server, it's a public-facing web server, you can register as a person who wants to hack that, and you have to file a form. There's a form online. You fill out this form. It's only for U.S. citizens, so you got to be a U.S. citizen. You fill out the form. They do a background check on you, so you're consenting to have a background check done, and then you're allowed to hack them. I mean, there's certain rules of engagement. You're not allowed to do denial of service or anything, but you're allowed to hack them. There is a requirement that if you find something, you tell them about it, and the idea is they pay you. So it's a true bug bounty program done by the Department of Defense, which I think that's fantastic. Right? They must have sat there and said, we're getting hacked by all these people all the time anyway. Why don't we at least make sure some of them are our friends and legitimate and that we can give money to and are actually there to help us?
Right.
It's all kinds of good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's that whole notion around crowdsourcing that is to be able to engage a large, I'll use the word portfolio of people, knowledge, to be able to do testing. Now, admittedly, they're constraining it by having the background checks and having to go through agreements, but by the same token, I can't think of a better alternative.
And the thing that I thought was pretty cool is,
opportunity.
You know, having people register to do this. What a brilliant way to have people sort of self-identify. Yeah, I'm a hacker, and I want to hack your stuff. Here you go, U.S. military, register me.
Right.
That's really impressive. A nice
Maybe
piece of work.
It's also like headhunting, right? Maybe they're looking for the next generation of people they can employ to protect the systems.
There's so many neat things in here. I mean, look, it could go wrong. Something bad could happen. It could make a big uptick in the number of attack attempts at them that could blind them to other things. There's all those possibilities, but on the whole, I think this is a really neat idea. And we're seeing many other organizations do these bug bounty programs.
Absolutely.
Like Facebook has had its famous one where Mark Zuckerberg has said, if you find a big enough hole in Facebook, I'll give you $1 million. And Google has its famous payouts of 1337, right? The elite number. That's how much they'll pay if you find something in there. So there's a lot of organizations that are doing this kind of thing. There's even a company called HackerOne that sets up bug bounty programs for other companies. So I mean, this is like mainstream now. And then, I mean, how more mainstream can it be than the U.S. military saying, yeah, we're in. Do that with us.
Absolutely. Makes a whole lot of sense. We have a bug bounty program at AT&T as well.
That's cool.
And it's very similar in the sense, not as, we don't do background checks on the individuals, but we certainly have, as any bounty program is going to have, there are basically certain things you need to agree to and constraints in terms of what types of activity you can perform on the sites. But it's an opportunity to help find some of the problems, get those problems corrected rather than become a victim. My only hope here, I guess, well, perhaps my not only hope, but a hope would be that perhaps they'll extend this and, if these folks have already gotten a background check through the DoD, perhaps extend this out to civilian government sites. For some reason, I have OPM in the back of my mind.
Yeah, really.
I can't think of why, but I'm sure there are others that perhaps will be practical.
I think this is the start of something good. And Secretary of Defense Carter did say that this is an experiment. They're going to try this with just DoD websites that are public facing. That's it for now. But the idea is in the future they might extend to other kinds of sites and maybe even go outside the DoD. It's good. And it's a ground floor opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Pretty neat.
It just, if they say websites, I mean, certainly websites have their own sets of complexities, but I think too often there are other little subtle things that get, sneak out onto the internet, which become as much of a problem as anything else. And it seems a little tricky to stay very specific.
And then, define a website. Well, it's on that site, but it's listening on a different port. Does it speak HTTP or not? So,
very subtle.
I mean, does that just mean TCP 80 and 443 via HTTP and HTTPS, or does it mean other things that might be on the same servers? There needs to be a little more clarity.
Hopefully they've spelled that out fairly clearly.
They're working on it as we speak.
They're working on it. Okay, good. So what else have you seen?
So another big thing that I'm pretty excited about that was really a main thing at RSA this year is the rise of this concept of hunt teaming. A lot of people talked about it. In fact, Amit Yoran, he is the CEO of RSA, and he delivers the initial keynote. And he talked passionately about hunt teaming. And hunt teaming, I'll describe it, and you guys will say, oh, we know that, right? But the idea is you have employees that work inside an organization, and their job is to identify the bad guys in their midst. They're hunting for the bad guys, find them, stop the bad guy, eradicate, prevent damage from happening. And you look at it and you say, well, that's like what we've been doing as blue teams and incident response people for 20 years, right? Yeah, but now they've got a new fancy title for it, hunt teaming. The reason I'm kind of excited about it is if you go back over the last 20 years or so, the offensive people had kind of a lot of excitement associated with them, right? The hackers, the pen testers, the red teamers, that's me. Right. And we talked when we were here in October about how that's kind of sexy stuff and hacking is fun and exciting and sexy. I think this concept of calling it the hunt team can bring some sexiness to that role and to say your job is really important and you're there to find the bad guys, right? And to help stop them from doing damage. It's not, it's not merely, incident response. Your job is there to get spanked by the bad guys. And no, your job is to find those and take care of it. So it's a concept that we've seen for a long time, but calling it hunt team. And Amit Yoran said in his keynote for RSA, he said, you need to make sure that you remove roadblocks from your hunt team. Encourage them to think creatively, to think dynamically, to start, writing up scripts. You want those people to be your smartest people, the ones that you have the least shackles on so that they can explore around your environment and find the bad guys. This is all kinds of cool. So this idea of a very dynamic, very incentivized for creativity, incident response capability, if you want to just call it that, or hunt team. Doesn't that just sound better?
No, it does sound better. And for some reason I'm thinking, sanitary engineer has a more positive kind of. But I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that and Stan, you're well aware of this. One of the things we've been working on is not just hunting for the bad guys, but hunting for just the bad guys trying.
Yes.
And so and you can't really stop simple reconnaissance activity, but there are things you can do. What I like to refer to as preventative analysis. That is, to look for the trends in the activity. Look for just the attempts. I'll take an example, a simple example: brute force password guessing attacks. Why wait for the brute force password guessing attacks? If you can observe that activity, make sure there are controls put in place, because all too often, systems, they don't have those controls in place by default. And so it's a exercise in, just looking and finding activities before it really becomes any significant problem.
And you're dynamically improving your security stance based
Absolutely.
on actual real-world malicious activity, but doing that proactively. That's
right.
That's good.
And so to your point, rather than wait to be a victim and have something alert and report something, it's giving the team the flexibility, the opportunity, encouraging, digging in, trying to find the things that can get in front of the attacks as far as possible.
Exactly, and that kind of leads into this other big trend in conversations at RSA. And so you've got this hunt teaming concept, and then there were a lot of talks about security operations centers, so-called SOCs, and how to manage them, how to run them at scale, how to provide proper incentives, techniques for handoff between the different groups within the SOC. And I think about all these things, right? I mean, you've got the bug bounty program, you've got the hunt team stuff, you've got managing, a security operations center at scale. And it's like the stuff that you guys do all the time and have been doing for decades and kind of pushing the envelope there. Well, now the RSA conference is all about that, which is pretty neat.
Very good.
I think that's cool.
It is very good.
Yeah.
So my hope is, and this was actually one of my 2016 predictions, is that there'll be more trend toward the controls as opposed to the analysis and activities. I think there's certainly a lot of value in the analysis and in getting as active as possible in terms of being able to respond to events or deal with the potential of an event occurring. But I think there's still that thing where, I guess perhaps closer to the bug bounty, that is getting the controls in place before the systems are put out there, or at least as systems are maturing, so that they're actually protecting themselves as opposed to sort of this reactive approach. So
the thing I like about that, and all of these different trends we've talked about at RSA, is if you think about the bug bounty program, the hunt team, and the SOC stuff, it's kind of red and blue working together. We talked a little bit about that when I was here in October, about red team does this, blue team does that. I think we get really special stuff in making security better when red and blue are working together.
Yes.
The offensive guys are helping the defensive guys defend better. The defensive guys are helping to push the red teamers, the offensive guys, to make them even better at what they do. And all of those trends are actually kind of in alignment with that.
Yeah, I agree with that thoroughly. And so similarly, I think and I'm pointing to Stan. I know I keep pointing to the wrong place for Jim, but in the camera there. But again, it's one of the things that I think we've been sort of encouraging as well. Yeah. That is, as we see, successful or not, as we see attack activities taking place, to try to incorporate that as a challenge for the folks that are in protective roles.
Right.
So in policy and deployment of systems, improving the practices so that it's similar but a little different than what you were describing. It's not really attackers. We're observing the attackers and then using it as a means to help
at the same
protect.
time, so you're doing all that to help the defensive folks, but you're probably also pushing your own red teamers and your pen testers. Say, make sure you're doing this, because if you're not applying the same techniques that the bad guys are doing, you're doing us a disservice.
Yeah.
So it kind of all feeds together, and AT&T's been at the forefront of this, it's for a good long time. It's great to see.
Well, we like to think so anyway.
It's good. No, really, it's true.
All right, very good. So, Jim, let's go to you. And just speaking of slowing things down or preventing attacks from being successful, maybe you can give us a little tip.
Yeah, I came across this article in German on the Heise Securities blog and used Google Translator to translated into English because my German is okay, but not great. But basically, what this article was about, we talked about Locky, I think, a couple weeks ago. Locky is the current brand of ransomware on Windows systems that seems to be getting the most attention and is propagating quite a bit. And they go in and encrypt all your files and on your whatever shares that you've got. Even if they're not mounted, actually, in some cases, they will go ahead and mount them and encrypt files on the shares. So the interesting trick that I saw in this article was some folks who were using Samba rather than actual Windows servers to host their file shares, and using fail to ban. I think we've talked about fail to ban on the show a few times, especially to block those brute force password guessers. I think any site that has SSH facing the internet should be running fail to ban, because you get all these password guessing attacks, and this will at least block them for some period of time. So the whole idea with this one was, if you turn on some additional logging in Samba, you could then set up fail to ban to detect when this ransomware was going out and encrypting the files, and you could block them then. So they would end up probably encrypting 5 files, but then they'd get blocked for 24 hours. So at least this would slow them down from encrypting everything on the file share. So I thought it was just a neat trick and a neat idea to do exactly what we were just talking about. Take advantage of, this is what in this case, the malware is doing. So what can we do to improve our defenses and slow it down when one of our users goes ahead and clicks on something they shouldn't have? So I thought it was a real neat idea.
It is. Fail to ban is really good stuff. We actually used fail to ban in the Holiday Hack Challenge on our side to kind of defend our infrastructure from all the attacks people were throwing at us. And yeah, I'm a big fan of fail to ban, and this is a really clever use of it.
Yep, and I agree. And I guess this works well if you put it in combination with perhaps the opportunity to get the antivirus updated to the point where it actually has a signature to detect the malware, or to pick up on the command and control and to be able to detect it and to be able to actually correct it. Otherwise, it really doesn't do anything. If you slow it down and it eventually encrypts all your files anyway, that's not really going to serve a very good purpose. But the opportunity to slow it down and give you a chance to catch up to them, definitely valuable.
Exactly. That's, if you can slow it down long enough that you can get in and fix it, that's the key there.
Right. So Ed, now that you've had a chance to rest your vocal cords for a bit here, we'll talk a little bit about the Holiday Hacker Challenge and a gnome in your home.
Yeah.
Tell us about the background on this.
So the idea of this is, the Internet of Things is a big thing, right? You can control lights, and there's toys that are on the internet and all that. And when I was here in October, I couldn't reveal the secret theme of Holiday Hack Challenge because we were still working on building it and such. But the actual theme was gnome in your home. And the backstory of this is, in this sort of fantasy world, there's a company called AT&T Corporation, ATNAS, and they've created this product called Gnome in Your Home. It's like Elf on the Shelf, but different. So Gnome in your home, and the idea is parents buy these little gnomes, and they're supposed to put them on a shelf or around the house, and you plug them into the wall, and they play holiday music, little 8-bit holiday music, right? Yeah. Jingle bells and stuff like that. And you're supposed to move them every day so the kids can find them.
Right.
And what we did is we had some legs made up, these little legs here, and we integrated these little legs. These are the very legs that we integrated into the challenge, because here's what was happening. The gnomes themselves actually had a camera mounted in the eye, and they had a circuit board inside, and it was sending wireless packets out onto the internet. And these two little kids in our scenario, they notice that these wireless packets are going out, and we give you the wireless packet capture. So you have to analyze it. And it's a command and control channel using DNS. And we also give you the firmware from the device. So it's like an Internet of Things. It's a toy. We give you the firmware, and you have to go through the firmware. And when you do this, you got to figure out what the big plot is. So we had a mystery. And the idea is Atlas Corporation had sold 2 million of these gnomes. And when you start going through the firmware and the packet capture, you realize that the gnomes are being controlled by super gnomes. And there are these super gnomes. There's 5 super gnomes in the world. And
rule them all, right?
Yeah, 5 gnomes to rule them all, exactly. So there's one that's, actually there's 2 in the US, there was 1 in Brazil, 1 in Japan, and 1 in the UK. So we got these 5 super gnomes. And then we also had a video game component on it. So the way that you get the packet capture is you have to walk into this little video game. It's a little role-playing video game. It plays holiday music in 8-bit, and you walk around and you walk up to characters and you interact with them. And then once you solve certain little puzzles in the video game, you get the packet capture. And then you have to solve some other puzzles, and then you get the firmware. So it was an integration of a video game into our narrative and a hacking challenge. Because the ultimate goal is for you to hack into the 5 super gnomes. So super gnome 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are all still up. The whole holiday hack challenge is up. You can play it now anytime, right? So you can go into the video game. What we noticed was a lot of parents would have their kids play the video game part. So it's, it's like Super Nintendo. You're running around and you're solving and little things jumping around and such. And then you get the packet capture and you get the firmware, and then you give that to mom or dad, and then they work on that piece. Right. So we have pictures. People would tweet pictures of families working on this stuff together. We wanted to make it fun and with the video game piece. So the idea is you hack into the 5 super gnomes. To what end? You have to resolve the plot. Your goal is attribution. Right. You need to figure out who the bad guy is, who is the villain. And to do this, we have you answer 10 questions. I mean, the first question is, where are the super gnomes located? The second question, blah, blah, blah. And we just walk you through. But the final question, I don't know if you noticed this, Stan, but the final question says, who is the villain? Yeah. Period. No question mark.
Oh,
all the other ones had a question mark at the end. So who is the villain? So you work your way through this thing, and I'll reveal it here because it's out there. You can read. There's write-ups. There's hundreds of write-ups on this thing. The actual so what Atlas Corporation is all about is they're taking photographs from the eyes of the gnomes, 2 million gnomes. They're taking them, and they have a group of burglars that they're coordinating with. And on Christmas Eve, they're going to deploy all of the burglars, and they're going to give them a specific set of things to steal from the houses. And they have to go into the houses. The burglars will steal all that stuff. They're going to sell it on the open market, and they're going to destroy Christmas. Because Atlas Corporation is reverse Santa. Santa spelled backwards is Atlas. So they're going to go and they're going to ruin Christmas by stealing everything rather than putting out the gifts. And who runs the whole thing? Do you want to say? Stan solved the whole thing. He got a super honorable mention, which is really impressive.
Which is pretty good, considering a lot of the things are random. Also, I think 7 out of the 10 winners were random, right?
7 out of 10 winners were random, and we had 3 though that got top billing.
It was, Cindy Lou Who, age 62.
Age 62. So Cindy Lou Who, from the original Grinch, remember she was aged no more than 2. Well, here she is 60 years later, and she realizes the Grinch is a chump. And he never lived up to what he was going to do. He wimped out at the last moment at the top of Mount Crumpet and gave up. She's going to do it right. She's going to do it with some technology where we've got the gnomes and the super gnomes, and she has this worldwide criminal empire. And you get to see her. We actually hired an artist to create Cindy Lou Who, age 62, so you could see what she looks like now. And you get these pictures and the camera overlays and all this kind of stuff you have to work your way through. And when we had these gnome legs, what we did is we took photographs all around our house and everything like that, so you could see, you never saw the gnome. You would just see his little legs hanging out. Because I wanted the gnome to be in your head. So you probably know what the gnome looks like.
Yeah.
I know what the gnome looks like, but we all think a little different of it. But you know that it has the candy cane striped legs. So we put that together, and in doing this, I mean, Super Gnome 1, rather easy to get into, I think, right? It's default credentials. We give you the firmware. You can pull the credentials from the firmware and log directly into Super Gnome 1. Super Gnome 2 gets more difficult. Super Gnome 3, 4, and Super Gnome 5, you've got to write 0-day. Our expectation was about 3% of the people would be able to get Super Gnome 5. Actually, a lot more got Super Gnome 5. But it was about maybe 10 or 12%. Pretty good.
That is pretty good.
And then in the video game itself, a lot of people played the video game, and the average person spent 90 minutes in the video game, which is kind of cool. We had 8,000 people go into the video game, and it's up right now. You can go and play it. We were experimenting with a lot of technologies in this one. So that whole video game, we customized a free open source video game called Browser Quest. And we changed it into Holiday Hack Quest. And we added a lot of stuff. I mean, tons and tons of code. We spent We spent about 6 months working on the code of the video game part of it. The whole challenge took a year to write. And it's up there, again, free. We don't make any money on it. We do it as a labor of love because we want to help people learn. But the video game itself was all written in Node.js, which is a crazy technology. So Node.js is server-side JavaScript that interacts with client-side JavaScript. And on Node, it's everything is in a single thread on a single web server. So if any one thing crashes, the whole thing is down. So it violates it violates all the rules of computer science that we learned. You have separate memory, separate processes, all this kind of stuff. But the fact is, it pushes as much of the work as it can to the client. So it runs in the browser and maintains just a little bit of state. And my team came to me saying, we'd like to do something in Node. And I looked at this and I said, I'm afraid this thing is just going to be too fragile and there's no way we could do it. But I'm willing to experiment, because they wanted us to do a commercial project written in Node. And I'm like, I don't know. So I said, why don't we do an experiment in the Holiday Hack Challenge? And then we'll see if we can write something that runs in Node and stays up and can have pretty huge scale. And that's what we did. And we had 99.9% uptime. The thing never came down. It was so rock solid. The only time it came down is we brought it down because we thought we had to change some things in the game. We didn't even have to bring it down. We learned more about it afterwards. We could have actually kept the whole thing running.
No kidding.
It is an amazing, I've been doing a little Node development myself over the last 2 months since the Holiday Hack. It's weird because you're writing in JavaScript and on a server, but it is cool technology. And even Super Gnome 4, we ate our own dog food. So we got all of our video game running inside of Node. And then Super Gnome 4, you have to hack a Node instance in the Super Gnome itself. So it's got all these different things fed into it. And then did you attend the award ceremony?
Were you in
there? Oh. So the award ceremony, we had this idea. Why don't we do the award ceremony in game? So we invited everybody we knew. We tweeted on it. We sent emails to all of our players, and we were going to announce the actual winners. So what we did is we went into our game. So this game is like a little town, and you have to walk around the town and collect things like cookies and stuff, and there's an Easter egg in the town and all that kind of stuff. So you walk through the town, we put in little signs that have arrows pointing to the award ceremony. So you walk down, and there was a door that was never opened during the actual game. We opened that door, and there was a lady greeting you outside, and all the signs point you to the award ceremony. You go inside there, and there's a stage. And on the stage is me and my whole team. We have posters behind us of all the previous Holiday Hack Challenges. You saw those, right? Last year's and the year before and the year before. And then it's playing the, Holiday Hack 8-bit music.
Right.
We actually had 400 people that came to the in-game award ceremony, and they're all running around, and we let them talk. So, and the little bubbles would appear above their head, whoop, as they say things. And we had a dirty word filter. So if you typed in a bad word, it would just replace it with the word gnome in all caps. So whenever you see, and we got a video of the award ceremony. And the award ceremony starts out, and it's me typing saying, welcome everybody, so glad you're here. And you can see boop, above my head, boop, all this stuff. Please, we'll be starting soon. And then we had a custom song, an 8-bit song that was the Star Wars throne room song, at the end of Star Wars Episode 4. We had that written as an 8-bit thing, so we played that because, we were giving awards. And then we did something I was so excited about, freak people out. I'm standing on stage and I typed, hey Phil, because he's one of the guys that did a lot of this development. Hey Phil, please hand me the microphone. So it goes, whoop, hey Phil, please hand me the microphone. Phil walks over to me, hands me the microphone, and I say, hello, can you guys hear me? We embedded into the stuff that we pushed down to the browser, a multicast audio thing, so everybody could hear as we announced all the winners and everything. But what we've done with this is now we've built a platform. So it's a platform that integrates video games with hacking challenges, and with, they called the feature that does this little audio broadcast, the guys called it this, like voice of God. So we have the voice of God that can talk to everybody inside the game at the same time. And we're going to be using this for the 2016 one. But it's going to be so much bigger and so much better. We started working on it before this one launched. The one coming up, it'll be this December 9th. We're going to run this one. And it is going to have, the graphics are going to look a little more grown up. It's not just simple little 8-bit sort of sprites. They're going to look a little more grown up. You'll probably see the same kids again, but they're going to be about 4 years older. In Gnome in Your Home, they were 6 and 10. They're going to be like 10 and 14. The music is going to be I just figured out the music last weekend, and we got the music all figured out for it.
Right.
We contacted the artists that make that music. We got their approval. And you're going to see much tighter integration of gameplay and the role-playing game. Just to give you a little bit of a brief of what that's going to be like. So imagine that there's a door, right, on a building. And right now, the way we did it in the 2015 version is you'd walk up to a person, and the person would give you a packet capture file, and you'd have to do stuff with the packet. Well, that's all very nice and good. But now, next to the door will be a computer terminal. You walk up to the computer terminal. In your browser, whoop, you're sitting at that terminal, and you got to do your magic. And if you do your magic, the door opens.
Wow.
So you don't have to install anything. It's all there in-game, really tight integration.
Very nice.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say what the theme is, but it's going to be another one of those mysteries where there's going to be attribution of the bad guy, and we've got the basics of the plot worked out of what's going to happen in it. I get so excited about this. Thank you for letting me share.
I'm actually. You have a lot of love to share here. You said it's a labor of love, and
we do.
Absolutely. You've
I
clearly
sometimes
put a lot of labor into this. And
it was probably
I'm
it was
fascinated.
over 1,000 hours in building the 2015 version. It's probably closer to 1,500 or 1,600 hours of my team and me. And I was thinking about this actually. This year's we're starting it already. We're working hard on it. It's probably going to be 2,000 hours or so. I sometimes think that maybe that's actually our reason for doing what we do. We do all this stuff like Net Wars and SANS teaching all that so that we can have a company that is economically viable with the goal of giving everyone the Holiday Hack Challenge for free. So the reason we do everything else that we do is simply so we can give away the Holiday Hack.
Right.
And we love to give it away. And we want more and more people to be in it. And that's why we keep it up all year round. And if you want to go through Gnome in your home, it's there. Or the year before was called, actually the year before was a Christmas Hacking Carol. With Scrooge, that's still up. And if you want to go to the one year before that, it was called It's a Hackerful Life, still up. We keep them up. I spend a lot of money on cloud services to keep all of these things up for people year round. So you could go through the last 10 years of Holiday Hack Challenges and build your skills and have fun.
Very cool.
So
It was an amazing challenge. I have to say the amount of work you put into it, I could see in every step.
Oh, thanks.
So I really appreciate it.
I'm so
And
glad
I
you
learned
did
so
it.
much. I learned a lot by doing the challenge, but then I learned even more by just trying to write everything up. And I hadn't realized how much I had to do until I had to write it all up.
Isn't that cool? So you get to the end of that, and you're like, wow, that Supernome 5 was really hard. And then you look at what you did in Supernome 4, Supernome 3, or the packet capture, or all the way back to what you did in the firmware, and it's like, wow. And we do try to stitch it all together, and then when you send us, your input, we have a strict requirement. Everybody that sends us input, you get an email response from us, and we tell you about what you sent us. So, if you did a really good job, you did a fantastic job, or I liked how you did this. We try to pick out some positives of everybody that sent, and we got over 500 entries, but we emailed everybody back, congratulating them, and then the winners, they got a little email from us too saying, hey, you're going to be there for the award ceremony because we'd like you to be there. We don't tell them why, but they kind of know why. So
Very
it
good.
is, I'm so glad you did it.
Yeah, it was great. I loved every single challenge because I learned something about Node.js. I hadn't used Node.js at all prior to that.
Truth is, I hadn't either.
Yeah.
And it's like a big thing. There's so much that's coming out inside of Node now. And we learn a lot in building these things, but also if you go through the video game, we made the video game into an integrated hint system. So what we would say is, find this character in the video game and he can tell you how to hack Node.js. Or find this character, and you walk up to him and then suddenly, boop, above that character, it starts giving you hints and things that you can click on and such. So it is kind of guided in the video game. So it was an experiment in video game / security challenge integration, and then this year, we're going to go so much further because what we're trying to do is to lighten the load on the user, so you don't have to install. You don't even have to install Wireshark. I mean, for this year's, you have to install Wireshark. If you had a Python interpreter, that helped. If you had this, it would help. What we're trying to go with next year is you could bring all your tools if you want, but if you have no tools, as long as you got a browser, everything is there for you right within the browser. That's our goal. I don't know if we're going to meet it, but maybe I'll come back and talk to you in October, see how it's going.
Well, I look forward to that. Thank you. Yeah, it's very good. I'd like to continue this.
It's so much fun. I love doing that stuff.
It does sound like a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to participate in it.
Well,
I guess I need to carve out.
There's time later today. You can
Yeah,
go.
there is time later today.
It's still up.
It's still up, and we'll keep it up forever, really, because because we want people to do it. When we were running it, so when you're in the video game, you can see everybody else in the video game, and you can talk with everybody else in the video game. And back in December, when this thing was running, with everybody working on it, there was this one area of the town that was fairly sparsely populated. We didn't have a lot of our characters there, and there weren't a lot of buildings. What would happen is people would walk to this part of the town, and they'd start talking with each other, sharing ideas and hints. And we're thinking, are they cheating? Should we stop it? We just let it go as a social experiment. And there were also, some fairly famous hackers that logged into this and were walking around chatting with people. It became like a virtual online hacker conference. And people chat with you. And I did debate with my guys a lot. I didn't want to allow users to talk with each other, because my worry was somebody would put in bad words or they would offend somebody or something like that. Josh Wright, though, is a friend of Jim Clausing's and mine. He pushed me really hard. He says, we've got to let users talk to each other. It adds a social dimension to this that will really make it special. And I finally said, okay, but we have to do a dirty word filter. And then some of the other guys on my team says, there's no way you can make a dirty word filter that will filter everything. And I said, but we have to try. Yes, you'll be able to misspell dirty words and they'll get around it, but we have to be able to tell people we tried to make sure there weren't dirty words. And we were kind of policing it. Every day we would get transcripts of everything that was said the night before. And if you said bad stuff, we were ready to pull the trigger on your character saying no. I'm amazed people were actually really well behaved. They were good to each other. We had a rule, be good to each other. It's like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Be excellent to each other. We wanted people to be good to each other, and they were. And we're going to up in the new one that's coming up, much more social interaction. We want it to feel like you're hanging out at a security conference with a bunch of friends working on stuff together. So look for even more of that.
One thing I did like, I think one of the answers initially you had to type to one of the characters. I forgot it was like an IP address or something like that.
Well, that's how we vet the scope.
Yes.
So the idea is we have these 5 supernomes around the planet, and I can't just, what we could have said is, here's the IP address of a supernome, go hack it. But we want you to figure, you have to use Shodan to find where the supernomes are. And by the way, we worked with Shodan to make sure the supernome addresses were constantly cached. For those that don't know, Shodan is a search engine for unusual devices, like webcams and stuff, and supernomes as it is. So we worked with the creator of Shodan to make sure that the supernomes would stay in there. But the idea is we didn't want to give you the IP address. We want you to have to use Shodan to find the supernomes. But then we had to come up with some way that, how do you know you're hacking an IP address that's allowed to be hacked? So we have one of the characters. You walk up to that character, you say the IP address you want to hack, and he tells you whether it's in scope or not. Now, I did have some players email me saying, I can't trust this little thing inside the game, this character that says, yes, you could hack that IP address. And they looked it up and they realized we were hosting this all on Amazon. These were Amazon EC2 instances. And they said, Ed, do you have permission from Amazon for us to be able to do this? And I do have permission from Amazon. And for those users that actually said, before I hack this IP address that's on Amazon, you need to send me the permission that you got from Amazon. And I did. So yeah, I mean, and Amazon was great to us. And it's still hosted up in the Amazon cloud right now. They didn't really understand what we were doing at first. We emailed them and said, we would like to do this. And they said, oh, it's a pen test. Where will you be pen testing from? And we said, well, it's actually a security game, and it'll be coming from all over the world. And they said, well, that doesn't sound like a pen test to us. Exactly. and we went back and forth, and finally they said okay. And I'm so thankful, because hosting this ourselves would have been hard. If we hadn't been able to do that, I'd have to find some other organization of good friends that has a large worldwide network that, I don't know, maybe. But Amazon took care of it. And I
no ill effects, I presume.
No ill effects. And Amazon was totally cool, and nothing broke. And we did use fail to ban, especially people were doing, complete searches in Supernome 1, looking for PHP and all this kind of stuff, just sending all these requests across the network. So we used fail to ban to throttle that, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Very good. So I'm presuming that these gnomes weren't very subject to a phishing attack.
As a matter of fact, they weren't. Last year, though, there was a phishing attack in the 2014 Holiday Hack Challenge. So what would happen is Alan Turing would introduce you to a friend, and then you'd have to provide this. So this friend was a bot on the net.
Alan Turing had a friend.
Alan Turing had a friend who was a bot. That seems to make sense, on the net. And it was actually a version of the ELIZA bot that we had customized. So you get to chat with Alan Turing's friend, and you have to social engineer her into clicking on a link. So that was in the 2014 one. 2015 one, no phishing and social engineering, but you never know for 2016.
Never know.
Yeah.
You know, the human factor is a big piece of this.
Even if the human is an ELIZA bot.
Even if it is. So, well, very good, Ed. Thank you very much for giving us the rundown on that. And yeah, I can't wait for the next one, quite frankly.
Thank you.
But in the meantime, I really am going to go take a look at the this year's.
Even if you just log into the video game portion, you'll laugh and you'll hear this music.
It really does sound like a lot of fun.
It's just
much more than I would have expected.
Yeah, we just wanted to make it
It's a lot.
good time.
I can't imagine how the next year is going to be bigger, but I look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm definitely going to. You got me for life on these.
Yeah, excellent. That's so cool.
So we're going to transition over to Stan here. And Stan, can you give us a little bit of a rundown on what happens when you do become a victim of phishing?
I think the problem is you can lose a lot.
Yeah.
And so in the example that we read on Brian Krebs' website, he gives an example of Seagate, a company that one employee was successfully phished and I guess lost some amount of W-2s and sent them somewhere else. Now, this was interesting the way they wrote this in and how many users were affected. It was thousands, but quote unquote, less than 10,000 by a good amount. I don't know if there's some sort of a reporting requirement or something like that, but it was less than 10,000.
The order of magnitude. It's more than 10.
Yeah, it's less than 10,000 by a good amount, but thousands. So, you know, it's very unfortunate. These employees, their W-2s are lost. They're going to get credit monitoring. One thing that Brian Krebs points out is that he believes this is part of the IRS fraud that's going on. So a lot of people are being impacted by this, where the fraudsters will submit for your income tax return. And once they have your W-2 information, that really becomes much easier.
Right.
So he explains that this might be one of those situations. So.
Well, it's actually good to bring that up because, you know, Brian Krebs has provided some advice for folks that feel they might be subjected to, you know, a tax, I guess, a tax return filing fraud, for lack of a better way of describing it. You know, there's actually an IRS form that you can fill out. It's like 14704 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Don't go by that number. But it's actually one that if you have any suspicion that somebody might try to file a return on your behalf, you know, in a fraudulent way, that you can actually set up some additional authentication process to be able to make sure that somebody can't file that return on your behalf. So that's probably worth for perhaps these folks to look into if there really is a suspicion that it might be related to using identity theft and it means to file fraudulent tax returns. And for the rest of us, the best advice would be file as early as possible.
So you get your return faster than the bad guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
You know, and with electronic filing, you can file the return, get it accepted, and then if you have to pay, set the date to be just before the deadline. So you don't have to necessarily pay with the when you file the tax return. So that's actually more incentive to get it in earlier rather than wait for the deadline.
As soon as possible. I find myself having to wait for all the forms to come in. Even though a lot of them are available online now, you still kind of, is there something I missed?
It takes a little while. It takes a little while. Well, you always have the safety valve if you need to file an amendment or something like that later on.
Yeah, but it's probably more paperwork, and I hate paperwork.
Do it electronically. It's not paper anymore. But yeah, thanks for bringing that because I think this is a good season for folks that if they haven't already filed their return, to make sure that they get those returns filed and you know, take whatever protective measures that are necessary. All right, so let's take a look at the internet weather for the last week or so here. And for the first item that we want to talk about, I think John Hogaboom talked about this last week. It was sort of our first discovery of this activity. This is scan probes on port 4028 TCP. You know, this has been previously associated with, I think, a backdoor associated with a botnet. There was a little bit of a I think one botnet trying to take over bots for another botnet, that sort of thing. We're not convinced that that's actually the case in this situation, but there's a good possibility that's still the situation. Nevertheless, I think what John showed last week were actually the number of source addresses that were doing this scanning activity, which is a really powerful indicator that it is in fact a botnet. That is, there were thousands of addresses associated with the scanning activity. But I thought it interesting to show it in terms of the number of probes. And the reason why is in the previous week, all of this activity that's over here to the right was showing up. But this activity farther to the left, actually on February 18th, did not show up. And the reason why is because that was one address. And so oftentimes in these situations where you see botnet activity starting to do scanning, there's some indicator that occurred prior that is perhaps a clue that might be coming. And I think that may be the case here. So this was actually a single address in a US-based cloud or hosting provider. And it probably had nothing to do with the provider itself. There was probably somebody that leased access to one of those servers and did this sort of test probing to see if it was worth to go further. And by the way, we're only showing 30 days worth of data here, but in fact, going back a significant amount of time, there is really no other significant scanning activity to speak of here. So this is actually a significant thing. Now, one of the things that we did find in further investigation is that it does appear that a lot of these sources are a very specific brand and model of a DSL router. And in fact, on the cover of the user manual associated with these devices, it actually shows a default user account and password, admin with a password of 1234. And it turns out that in this particular case, a lot of these devices are in fact in that sort of situation. So, or it appears to be nevertheless. So we don't know for certain that that's the situation here, but there's a possibility that these devices are being compromised, turned into bots, and then perhaps in fact setting up this port as a backdoor. So it may in fact still be related to that botnet activity that was described earlier. This is actually the map that John Hogaboom showed from last week, showing the concentration areas where this activity has taken place. Not really very much in the United States, heavy concentrations in the Philippines, Thailand, Iran, as well as Brazil. And that may in fact be related to ISPs in the area or something that are providing these devices. So if you have any suspicion that you might be using one of these devices, you might want to take a look at it further and see if there's something to do that can be done to lock it down. Looking at the top 10 most probed ports, well, top of the list, still port 23, but actually surprisingly, port 53413 seems to have dropped down. We've been tracking that for some time now. It's actually a backdoor. We'll take a look at that a little bit more closely in a bit here. But that has dropped down somewhat from previous weeks. It's down 5 spots. But then it's followed by port 1900 UDP. This is scanning for simple service discovery protocol, perhaps to use in reflective denial of service attacks. There's not much purpose other than that to be scanning for that. And then port 80 TCP, followed by 53 UDP, 443 TCP. There's been a little bit of movement in there, but nothing really significant, what I would describe as changes in activities. On port 22 TCP, we did see a little bit of a jump in activity here. It's actually moved down in terms of the number of probes, but I think later on we'll see that it's jumped up a little bit in terms of the number of sources doing that probing. We already mentioned 53413, then followed by 445 TCP, 3389. Most of these are relatively stable in terms of the activity that we've seen over the last several weeks here. Taking a little closer look at port 23 TCP, it looks like we're sort of on an upward rise again in terms of the number of probes. Certainly not anywhere near the peak of what we've seen, which dates back to almost to the beginning of the year here. But it is actually important, I think interesting to note, that we're still measuring in terms of hundreds of millions of probes per hour in this activity. So it's not as if, even if this were going down, or even if it's in steady state, it's still a significant amount of probing activity. And then looking at 53413, just again to point out that there's sort of a drop in activity there that's taking place. Now notice here that there are some sort of gaps in the activity that are taking place. It appears to be perhaps maybe a weakness in the command and control, or activity sort of dropping out a little bit. I tried to do a little bit of a correlation between the 4028 TCP and this activity, and there seemed to be some I'll call it weak correlations in the time of the dropouts. And so there's a possibility there's a relationship between the two that is perhaps some of the drop here is because resources are being steered toward probing on another port. Again, it wouldn't be surprising. A lot of these are going after router devices, home router devices, and trying to get, what I call the Internet of Insecure things, things with, default username and passwords to recruit those into botnets. And, as we've talked about many times, Ed, I'm sure you're familiar with this. In fact, the whole theme of Internet of Things, a lot of these devices are on all the time. Right. In these particular cases, they're actually right on the Internet, exposed to the Internet. They're not really running antivirus. They don't have intrusion detection. Mm-hmm. If they're not locked down, if there's not a firewall on the outside of them to protect them. So from somebody who's trying to build a botnet, if they can compromise these devices, it's very lucrative from their point of view.
Territory, yeah, indeed.
Well, and not getting automatic updates either.
Right.
Yes, good point. Actually, some of the newer devices, I think, are getting a little bit better at that. But to your point, Jim, most of the devices out there today don't have really good patching procedures, and they really need to get better at that. Looking at the most sources doing the probing, far and above port 23 at the top, followed by 53.4.13, and then actually not much really additional report here other than we do see a climb in the number of sources that have been probing on port 22. I took a look at this. It's not any significant change. And then we had already talked about port 4028, which is relatively new on the list. Oh, actually, on port 22, I stand corrected. Taking a look here over the last 30 days, we do see a number, what I would call is basically a doubling of the number of sources on port 22 TCP that's scanning. So a botnet that's perhaps taken a little closer look at this. We have seen in the case, again, home routers where devices have been compromised and then they basically looped back or enabled port 22 to be accessible from the internet and essentially using that as a backdoor to get into those devices later on. So it's a possibility they're coming back to look for those. So that's our show for today. We'd like to thank you for joining us. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at att-ThreatTraq@list.att.com. You can find AT&T ThreatTraq on the AT&T Tech channel. It's on YouTube as well as on iTunes. And you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @ATT Security. And Ed, you have a Twitter handle, right?
I do. It's just Ed Skoudis, EDSKOUDIS.
All right, very good. So if you have any comments, feel free to tweet us or Ed, and we'd like to hear from you. And we'd like to thank you, Ed, for joining us today.
It's great to see you, as always. Thanks, Stan. Thanks, Brian.
I really appreciate the conversation, and especially appreciate your enthusiasm for the Holiday Hacking Challenge, because that is, I think, the more I hear about it, the more I want to really dig into it. And
please check it out. Thanks.
And learn more. Thank you, Stan, for joining us today. Thank you, Jim. I'm Brian Rexroad. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and until then, keep your network safe.